Hey, hello everybody. This is Stefano from All Source News, and in this video, I'm going to give a brief summary and explanation on the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. I know a lot of you guys really appreciated kind of the overview of the cartels that I went through in my first video, and in this one is going to be the first series also is kind of going into detail on each individual conflict that's kind of affecting Mexico and the key components and actors and where the fighting is going on. First, I want to start off with kind of some of the latest news that's going on. I'm leveraging an app called SitRep for this one right now, and then I'll go more into a more territorial control one. But here we see the latest situation in Mexico and kind of all the key players that are involved in the actions and the activities that occurred. And Sinaloa is clearly one of the hotbeds right now of the situation, and we're seeing all the different groups and actors involved in the violence. What we have here, something that happened about yesterday. What we see is that Mexican authorities did seize 35 IEDs and armored vehicles in Cosala, Sinaloa. Cosala, Sinaloa is a very active front right now between the Mayito Flacos and Chapitos War, the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. We see a lot of violence centered around there. So it's pretty hard to really determine who these IEDs belong to, who had these up armored vehicles, but it does show that Mexican authorities are very active in this area, and this is something that I would like to highlight here. This was an operation that was done both by federal authorities and local authorities that seized a significant amount. In addition, as highlighted here, 14 long weapons, one grenade launcher, over 6,000 rounds were seized. And the key component here, which is something that we've seen a significant increase of, is 35 IEDs were seized by Mexican authorities. It's important to note that IED usage across Mexico has increased significantly throughout the past couple of years, specifically, last year and this year. A case in point is in Tamaulipas. February of 2025, the U.S. State Department put a do not travel for the state of Tamaulipas because of IEDs, and an American citizen actually did die because of that. And so now we're seeing this also in Sinaloa, to be expected, because this is the heartland of the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. So with that being said, thank you, SITREP, for this information. We are going to go to the map that we have that I can give kind of a overview on the latest situation and give you guys what's going on. So moving on to Mexico specifically and Sinaloa, where this is the focus of this video. I mean, you can kind of see areas here that where Sinaloa is going on and the major actors. Clearly, as I said in my first video, the main one is Los Mayito Flacos, highlighted here in purple. They have a significant presence along Durango. The main group that Los Mayito Flacos have in Durango is a group called Los Cabreras. That's one of the factions. They have almost basically an absolute control over the state of Durango. And we do see Chapitos and, more importantly, the Jalisco New Generation try to challenge Mayito Flacos' territorial control and Los Cabreras' territorial control over Durango. And that's kind of what we see here. Kind of this light blue, we see this is the territory controlled by Los Chapitos. As you can see, although Mayito Flaco does have some control around Sinaloa, for the most part, Sinaloa still has a lot of control of the Los Chapitos. As you see here, Cosala is kind of highlighted, and we see a lot of the violence, more than likely Chapitos pushing offensives, and this is kind of where that seizure happened. So based on the territorial map, it does look like it could have been Mayito Flaco, but again, what I tell people is that even in territorial control, when we look at the areas, these aren't solid front lines like you would see, let's say, in Russia, Ukraine, right? Where two groups have a clear front line, there's trenches, and they try to battle it out and move either centimeters, meters, or kilometers along the front line. Although there's clearly one group that has a territorial control, they do operate in other people's territory and kind of move around, right? These aren't solid front lines. And I think people need to understand that's not what we see in Mexico, right? It's a little bit more fluid than that. And although, let's say in Durango, clearly Los Cabreras has absolute control, specifically in the capital of Durango, we might run into instances where CJNG or Los Chapitos have active cells in the city, as an example, right? A very small presence, but still there. And even these highways, again, civilians use these highways, the military uses these highways, police forces use these highways. You'll see up armored vehicles freely travel around even in an adversary's territory, and they have clashes here, as indicated by the area here in Cosala, which is what I highlighted earlier. So Chapitos, these are the areas in Sinaloa that they have an area of territorial control. Los Chapitos currently are led by two of El Chapo's sons, being Ivan Archibaldo and Jesus Alfredo. The other two sons that were kind of part of Los Chapitos being Ovidio Guzman, and the son has the same name as the father, Joaquin Guzman. They're both in U.S. prisons at the moment. The Civil War started because Los Chapitos, one of the Chapitos leaders, Joaquin Guzman specifically, tricked Maito Flaco's father, Mayo Zambada, into getting into a plane, and then that plane went into the U.S., where U.S. authorities detained them last year during the Biden administration. It was an FBI-led operation. The father was captured, and that's where the Civil War started, because Maito Flaco declared war on Los Chapitos for obviously handing over the father to U.S. authorities. So clearly, since the war started, the Maito Flacos have gained the most amount of territory, and Los Chapitos have been in the backhand. Because of the loss of territory that Los Chapitos have been suffering in the Civil War, they did make an alliance with CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, right? Which, as shown in the map here, they have their base of operations, as their name indicates, in Jalisco specifically. And CJNG is very well known to have alliances all across Mexico, La Línea, Metros, even the Rayena Phoenix organization and such. But the key one right now in this strategic alliance is between CJNG and Los Chapitos. So that's kind of the situation. And what we've seen since the alliance has occurred is an increase of CJNG fighters in Sinaloa, around Culiacan, and other areas as well, but more importantly along the front lines and the border areas between Durango and Sinaloa. We see a lot of fighting in the remote mountainous areas, specific around here. In this part here, we see a lot of the fighting in the border areas between Durango and Sinaloa. And what we've seen actually is a lot more CJNG fighters involved in that fighting, more than Los Chapitos. And what I've been told by sources of mine is that, for all intents and purposes, CJNG dictates to Los Chapitos how to fight and where to fight, right? So although there's a strategic alliance, they're not equal in this alliance, right? There's, Iván Archibaldo still has the ability to claim some level of independence for Los Chapitos from Jalisco New Generation, but for all intents and purposes, he is subservient to CJNG. And one of the key leaders that we've known from CJNG who sent fighters into Sinaloa to fight is a man named El Jardinero. He's one of the key, let's call him lieutenants of El Mencho, the leader of CJNG. He has been very active, specifically along these border regions with Durango, and fighting Los Cabreras intensively there to try to get more territory away from Los Cabreras and expand their area of influence. When we're talking about, let's say, Culiacan, I see another group, not necessarily El Jardinero, other people. One of the names that I've heard is a CJNG leader from Michoacán called El Yogur. He looks like he's in the capital region fighting on the sides of Los Chapitos or really maintaining peace and security and stability for areas around Culiacan, the capital of Sinaloa. That's El Yogur, right? So that's the Chapito CJNG dynamic. And so, before even the CJNG Chapito alliance, we did see reporting and rumors, and at this point I think it's pretty much confirmed, of one of the alliance that was formed that Mayito Flaco managed to get, and that's right here in this area highlighted. They go by various different names: Cartel de Guasave, which is formerly a member of the BLO, the Beltran Levaya organization. Most people just know him as Chapo Isidro. They call him Mesa Flores factions. Chapo Isidro is the name, right? That's the guy. And he has always had a very intense, strong presence here in this area of northern Sinaloa, specifically in Guasave. And again, within the construct of the big cartels, he's a very minor player, but he controls significant amount of territory. And in around May of this year, that's when we saw Chapo Isidro launch offensives against Los Chapitos here along northern Sinaloa. And one of the rumors or suspicions is that the reason why Los Chapitos and CJNG announced their strategic alliance, which was rumored for months prior to that, one of the key reasons why they did that is because Chapo Isidro launched an offensive in northern Sinaloa, specifically targeting two key players of Los Chapitos' leadership, being La Numerada and El Perris. El Perris was killed last month in a Mexican Special Forces operations. They managed to kill him. But the introduction of Chapo Isidro into this fighting against Los Chapitos in coordination with the Mayito Flacos really was the end of Los Chapitos, and they needed support. And that's when the alliance was happened, and that's why we saw CJNG sent significant amount of fighters, to the point now that I would even make an argument that CJNG clearly in the Chapito CJNG alliance, they're the top players right now, right? And so, This is the area that we kind of see, and we can kind of go around and see the kind of the territorial areas. Again, don't view these lines as definitive front lines, right? These are where I think where the cartel has the most amount of influence, but you can still have other players involved in this kind of influence battle. So that's how we have to do it, because again, this is from Active Cartel Map. I've highlighted in my previous video. It's an account that I've regularly interacted with and does great job and great work. The key term is influence, and so you can have various players and actors involved, but there's always one more predominant, and that's how you do it, because you can't view this as front lines like Russia, Ukraine. And so here, this is kind of the area that we see. These are the different areas. The Mesa Flores organization and the Mayito Flacos are battling Los Chapitos and CJNG, and that's kind of the area. A lot of the fighting lately has happened in Cosala. El Rosario is another one right here where we see a lot of the fighting. Matatlan is a key, I think, objective of Mayito Flaco, specifically Los Cabreras. They really want Mazatlan because of the access to the maritime ports in the Pacific coast. This has a major port, and this would really assist Los Cabreras and Mayito Flaco into having more drug trafficking routes into Mexico, and a huge importer of narcotics, drugs, chemical precursors, etc. So Matatlan is a key objective of Mayito Flaco and Los Cabreras, and we've even seen kind of Mayito Flaco propaganda showing videos of like Mayito Flaco members driving around Mazatlan, or these were probably edited videos, but to kind of highlight that it's inevitable that Mazatlan will eventually fall to those Mayito Flacos. So we do know that Mazatlan is a key objective of Mayito Flaco. And Los Cabreras, they really want control over this city, as I mentioned earlier, because of the drug smuggling that goes into the country. But for now, Los Chapitos are really holding that area very much so, and they do not want to lose it, because the loss of Mazatlan would be a death sentence for Los Chapitos, because then all they really would have left as a major territory is Culiacan, which is right here. Now, again, for the most part, Culiacan I do view more as a Chapito territory, but again, as mentioned, we do have significant Mayito Flaco presence there, and mostly cells. The Mayito Flacos really prioritized at the beginning of the Civil War to try to seize Culiacan. They were not successful, but there are a lot of cells from both parties active here, and a lot of the beheadings and killings that we see in Culiacan is either Los Chapitos or Mayito Flaco killing rivals and leaving the bodies there, and SITREP does a really good job of highlighting those instances of violence that occur, because the homicide rate in Culiacan is just through the roof, right? And so in Culiacan right now, we've kind of not seen the up-armored vehicles battling each other out in the city like we saw at the beginning of the Civil War. Now it's mostly target assassination attacks, and even attacks against businesses, but really much hit and run, not large formations battling out on the street. Now we've seen more assassinations, burning of businesses, attacking homes that belong to one cartel or another, and that's what we do. But Culiacan, for the most part, is still under the control of Los Chapitos, and it's still a very important drug manufacturing town that both sides want to control and maintain. Where we do see a lot of the up-armored vehicles, the drones dropping explosives, all of that, is like kind of more in these a little bit more remote areas on the border. Cosala is a perfect example. El Rosario right here. We do see more of that kind of force-on-force violence, much more now than we see in Culiacan. Obviously, this isn't a key route for the Jalisco New Generation to send fighters, and that's now why they are in Sinaloa. So, this is a quick explanation using SITREP and Active Cartel Map to give you an explanation of what's going on in Sinaloa. The only other area that I put is kind of in northern Sinaloa, outside of the Mesa Flores. We do have kind of the Sonora area, and then I highlighted this in my first video, the Independent Cartel of Sonora, which broke off from Los Chapitos, and they are fighting there. There's still violence in Sonora. One of the key factions of Los Chapitos still active there is called Los Delta Pelones. They're fighting Los Salazars, Los Paredes, Cazadores Fantasmas. But I'll make sure to go more into detail on the situation in Sonora, specifically in a different video. But we're not seeing, for example, Los Salazars, Cazadores Fantasmas, or Paredes really launch offensives into Sinaloa, right? That's not really happened. That violence is mostly centered in Sonora, and we've not seen that go into Sinaloa. Not saying it can't, but for now, that's not what we've seen. But again, this is a quick video. I just wanted to make you guys for the situation in the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. Again, thank you, Active Cartel Map and SITREP, for the tools you have. And I really hope you liked it. Please let me know what you think. Did you think this was a good enough detailed analysis of the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War? Would you like more in detail? And if you guys are happy, please let me know what's the next cartel war that you want me to focus on, or if there's a topic completely separate that you'd like me to talk about. But that's all I have for today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you the next time.